Thanks for joining us. I'm Molly. I'm the CEO of the ISA. Welcome to 2021. Yay, we made
Oh,
it. 2020 was challenging, but we are still here and we are ready to go. And the numbers show it. This is a very well attended class. And I know Dave has something to do with that, but also people are just ready to get started in the new year. Dave, thank you for being here to kick
my
off
pleasure.
the year for us. We are so grateful to have you here, Dave, and the ISA are longtime friends. He is a fantastic consultant and author. If you don't know him, I'm happy that you get to meet him today. Please check out his website at keepwriting.com. And he is an author of several books, including the Screenwriting Bible, Screenwriter's Bible,
Screenwriter's Bible.
and Dr. Format Tells All.
Oh, yeah.
So lots of good information. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Dave for the next hour and a half-ish, and everybody enjoy the class.
Okay, welcome to 3 crucial characteristics your script must have. And as Molly has said, this is Dave Trottier. I just want you to know I'm really excited about this material. It's been a lot of fun preparing for this. And we're going to talk about how to make your screenplay more attractive, more readable, fresh, more moving, touching, affecting. But first, I have a quick question for you. I don't know if you're having any difficulties with your script or not, but I see a lot of clients and students who feel this way, depending on where they are in the process. I don't know if you're working on just on an idea or on your first draft or completing your final draft, but there's always frustrations. And I just wanted to give one little tip before we get started here, and that is to relax and have fun. Writing should be a fun endeavor. It should be something that's enjoyable to do, and you can't write when you're uptight. So when we relax, we find that we're flying through our scripts, and I hope that's what happens with you. Yes, there are going to be bumps along the way, and there's going to be blocks, and there's going to be frustrations. But if you are in a relaxed state of mind, the writing will go better than it otherwise would. Okay? Now, if you're ready, let's get going. Okay, making your script more attractive. And it's important to ask this question. Some of you who know me well know I ask this question a lot because I think it's so important. When I'm in a regular classroom, the answer I usually get to, who is your audience, is all of the above. Sometimes producer, sometimes the agent, but the correct answer is none of the above. And here is why. You're really writing primarily for a reader, a story analyst, because when you send your script to a producer or to an agent, that person does not read your script. They hand it off to a reader who writes a coverage and either recommends or doesn't recommend your screenplay. So if they don't recommend your screenplay, then the producer and agent, or whomever you send it to, the person who requested it may not actually read it. So even though you're writing for all of these people in a way, your primary audience is the reader. And therefore, what you write must be readable. And so what does a reader want? Well, there's 6 things I'd like to cover quickly. And the first one, of course, you've heard this before. You want to write lean, white space, short speeches, short paragraph, no big blocks of black ink, that sort of thing. It needs to be attractive to look at. And that involves getting it properly formatted. Now, it doesn't have to be perfectly formatted. If I were to say it has to be perfectly formatted, I stand to gain from that because I'm Dr. Format, and I would get more business if I insisted that it had to be perfect, but it doesn't. Everyone has their own little nuance as to what is correct format and what is not correct format, but there are generally accepted formatting principles. They're in my books. You've seen them. You want to abide by those and impress the reader with the fact that you understand the language of the industry, and that is formatting. But don't get so crazy about it that you buy a handgun. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you do need to make the effort. Be clear. Clarity is so crucial. You have readers who, especially Hollywood readers, who have tons of scripts on their desks and aren't paid very much, and they read fast. And so you cannot afford to lose or confuse a reader. And sometimes when I'm reading a screenplay, I find myself asking questions like, where am I? I mean, it says interior Christmas Day. That's not a location. Where am I? Or did the guy die? Or is the woman on page 1 the same as Joan on page 4? I mean, help the reader out. Be as clear as you possibly can. It's even more important than the literary quality of the script. Be specific. We're going to spend some time with being specific, but let me give you a quick example now. Susie enters the room. And that sounds like it's specific, as it feels like a specific action, but really more can be done with that. Ask yourself, how does she enter the room? Does she tiptoe? Does she kick the door down and collapse through the opening? Does she march in triumphantly or angrily? You can characterize the character by how you describe their actions. So be specific. And this example I gave you, they're more interesting than Susie enters, and they're more original and more entertaining. You want to write in an entertaining style, not a matter-of-fact style or informative style, but in an entertaining style that's going to grab the interest of the reader. Remember, we're writing for a reader. So the bottom line here is be readable. Okay, let's talk about fresh writing. And this is probably our longest section because we're going to talk about story and character and dialogue and action with regard to that. So regardless of what you're working on, one thing is crucial. You want to be creative. And what is creativity? Creativity is not to create something out of nothing. It's what we often think of, that it's just got to be totally, completely original. More often, it's a new twist on an old idea or on an old scene or on a technique or something you've seen before. That's all you need for that. Now, an important question: what does a coin punch and a wine press have in common? And some of you already know where I'm going with this, but perhaps the greatest invention in history was movable type. And how did Johann Gutenberg come up with this idea of movable type? Well, he knew how a coin punch operated. And after some hard work one day, he went to a winery and saw a wine press and observed the wine press. And then he just simply put the two together. He combined the coin punch with the wine press, and voila, we had movable type. So it was a new twist on, I guess, two old ideas, or combining two old ideas into something new. This is what creativity is about. Your original script must be original. I'm still waiting for a script to land on my desk that has the title, The Three Wolves and the Big Bad Pig. You know, a new twist on an old idea. Okay, let's talk about being fresh in terms of story. And what I have done, I've been evaluating and reading screenplays for over 30 years. And I've made a list of things that I see too much of. And so maybe you're doing some of these things. Let's go through these and see how we can apply this principle of adding a new twist. opening the screenplay with a dream, or everything you saw in this movie was a dream. Was a dream. And of course, that worked in The Wizard of Oz. It may not necessarily work for you, but I wanted to just point up this one. If you're going to open with a dream, you need to handle it in an original way. One of my favorite dreams, movies that open with a dream, is Naked Gun 33 1/3. It's a parody on opening with a dream, because opening with a dream is so cliche. They did a parody on it. Well, that's a creative way to handle that. A glass of water thrown in his face. Okay, how can we handle this in a more original way? Because I mean, we've seen this a million times, and I've seen it in tons of scripts. What if the woman throws the water in the man's face, but there is no water in the glass? She's already drunk it all. Now you have a new situation. You have a twist. The twist created a twist. And so what will he do now? What will she do now? It's going to be different than what we commonly or typically see. Same thing with the kick in the groin. Let's say the man this time, he has a clipboard in his hand. He drops it quickly enough that she breaks her toe kicking the clipboard. Okay, is he going to take her to the hospital or to the doctor? Is she so mad that she's going to try something else? See, if you get creative and add a new twist, that maybe the things that we've already seen, you can make it more fun, more interesting, more dramatic. Hanging from a cliff. So the woman falls off the cliff, and then her hands come up to grab the top of the cliff. But what if she fell and there was a ledge below, and she's actually standing on a ledge and just puts her hands over to come over? It's just a new idea, a new way to handle this that an audience will appreciate because they're familiar with the cliche. Okay, here is a cliche premise. The wife or husband is killed. He or she is a suspect and must find the killer and get revenge. Now, if you're writing a story that's like this, go ahead and write it. I'm not saying you shouldn't write it, but approach it in a more creative way. And maybe how you execute the scenes will be creative, and it'll be just fine. If we want to change the premise, okay, what if the husband is searching for the killer, and in the end, he finds that the killer is his wife? In other words, she killed herself and framed him. And now he has a whole new problem. And maybe getting revenge is not so sweet anymore. So try to find original ways to approach things. Avoid this. We've seen it a lot of times where the character is killed and all of a sudden is alive again. It worked great the first 100 times that we saw it. Photos. Photos are cliches. I think they still work. In the first scene, we see a graduation photo, or the hockey team, or a husband and wife, or the family, or a man with a woman. We don't know who the woman is. This is a great way to handle visual exposition. Just realize it is cliche. I think it still works. But when you do it, let this photo emerge more naturally or believably, or handle it in a more clever way. Don't rely on other movies to make your movie work. Don't have Gone with the Wind playing on someone's TV set and they're watching a scene from Gone with the Wind and they get an idea of what they need to do to solve their problem in your movie. Just write an original screenplay. Okay, character. Let's kind of do the same thing with characters. And common blunders that I've seen, I'm not sure I want to go so far to call them blunders, because we can work with these. I often see characters that are cliche, like, now I know this is James Bond, just has a different name, but it's really kind of a James Bond ripoff. Stereotypes. Stereotypes can work in a comedy, especially a broad comedy, and sometimes in an action movie, but try not to have them. I know that when I read a screenplay that's about, that has a male who is Irish, I automatically know he's either a priest or a cop. It seems like if you're Irish, you can only be a priest or a cop. Break the stereotype. Okay, avoid generic characters. They're just the typical run-of-the-mill character that we've always seen in other movies and so forth. Let's get original. Don't write in your screenplay a Brad Pitt type character, or think Johnny Depp in Willy Wonka. No, we want an original character who is fascinating. We want someone who's fresh. We're talking about writing in an original way. Okay, I see this too many times. The character is a writer trying to break in, and of course, the movie we are watching ends up being the novel or screenplay that he sells at the end of the movie. Avoid this. You know, writing as a goal is not very visual. I know that in Romancing the Stone, the character is a writer, but her goal is to save her kidnapped sister, and she finds romance along the way. It's not about her trying to break in as a writer. So this is just something that's hard to pull off. If you can do it creatively, more power to you. The confidant who has no life of her own or his own. So we have the central character, and her best friend is just there in the movie to be a sounding board, to hear the central character complain, to get the internal dialogue out of the central character. You know, this is just furniture. This character is not a real person. This person should have a goal, a need, or a desire, or an intention, and have something in their life. Maybe they will have an intention that will complicate the main plot of the central character. It would make it a much more interesting relationship if you handle it in that way. Over exaggerating emotions. I see this a lot. I think we all have a tendency to do this because we want to make sure it gets across that the character is sad, happy, or whatever. I read a screenplay of a client who had, there were 8 different characters who sobbed at 8 different places in the screenplay. And I'm not talking about just crying a few tears. I mean sobbing. And I told my client about this, and he said, well, I just want to make sure it gets across, you know, that he's sad or angry or whatever he's crying about. Well, you're overwriting, and it's easy to get involved in overwriting. You know, maybe one character might sob, but another character handles it in a different way. You know, sometimes trying to hold the emotion in is stronger than the emotion itself. So, you know, just a little tip, be careful that you don't overwrite your character. I often see characters, descriptions like this. The male lead is ruggedly handsome, and the female lead is beautiful but doesn't know it. Avoid these cliche kinds of descriptions, but really what the problem is, we're often thinking of our characters solely in physical terms. Your character is more than their body. Your characters have personalities and attitudes, viewpoints, fears, relationships. And I often see a female character described solely in terms of her looks. And I've seen male writers as well as female writers do this. I guess that's a tendency. So just try to make your character as full and complete as you can, and give them the color that they deserve, and realize that they are more than just their bodies. Now, how do you introduce a character? I have 4 good examples here. 2 of these are from clients, and I need to explain that whenever I use something from a client, I get written permission first. So, and sometimes it's difficult because they'll say, well, Dave, you want to use it as a bad example, don't you? I say, well, it'll help a lot of writers, if I have permission to use that. But I always protect my writers. I never take anything out of your screenplay and talk about it in a class or in a webinar or something like that. So I just wanted to be clear about that. But here's the first one. This is from a client. Angie, 40s, dresses too young for her age and gets away with it. I absolutely adore that. I thought, that tells us so much about Angie. So the writer is wisely saying as much as she can with as few words as she can. This one is from Shawshank Redemption. Warden Samuel Norton strolls forth, a colorless man in a gray suit and a church pin in his lapel. He looks like he could piss ice water. So that gives us a sense, just a little sense, helps the reader kind of get a handle on the character. Okay, Max, he's a modern day contemporary character. Max, 17, is a pirate in ripped jeans. Isn't that beautiful? My client gets an A for that. Okay, this is from Alvin Sargent, Ordinary People. And I'm going to emphasize certain words in this description that he writes. Beth, that's the mother in Ordinary People, Beth, 39, looks down at the kitchen counter, then turns away sharply. The refrigerator door opens and we see in the cold, hard light that it is perfectly organized. The entire Jarrett kitchen is as neat as a pin. Okay, so Alvin Sargent is describing the kitchen, but who's he really describing? He's describing Beth. So it's just an inventive, clever, original way to describe the character. Okay, dialogue. Do we have any of these common issues? Long voiceovers on page 1. There is an industry bias with developing writers against long voiceovers on page 1, or even narration in general, because it's so often amounts to obvious exposition. You don't want to describe what we can already see on the screen. You don't want to just tell us stuff that we need to know. Good narration adds an extra layer of drama, comedy, or meaning, or any combination of those. And so just be careful if you're planning on narration, how you handle it. Everyday pleasantries and introductions, how are you? I'm fine. How's the weather? Things are great, and this is stuff we've heard. It's not interesting. Remember that your characters are original characters, and if they are unique, then maybe they speak in a unique way. And maybe your character says, hello, how are you, in a different way. I worked with a man years ago. He was from Europe, and he would always say, top of the morning to you, top of the morning to you. And I thought, well, that's an original expression. It's an everyday pleasantry that's unique. So in general, we avoid everyday pleasantries and introductions and so forth. But if we're going to have them, let's handle them in an interesting way. How does your unique character express this thought from his uniqueness? And that goes to typical and derivative writing as well. You hear expressions like, the guy gets shot 3 times in the chest and the character comes up to him and says, it's going to be okay. I've heard it's going to be okay a million times, and maybe it'll work in a particular circumstance, but maybe there's a better way to express that. Often, if we're introducing a family in a screenplay, it'll be the typical breakfast scene. And I'll read dialogue like, breakfast is ready. What are we having? You'll be late for school. Don't forget to feed the dog. And it's just stuff we've heard a million times. It's typical, it's derivative. We want this handled in an interesting way. We don't want to see the ordinary breakfast. We want to see something that will subvert our expectations. Okay, this word beat, it's perfectly okay to use. It means pause, and there's no problem with it. I am not anti-beat. However, when you use this word, it's really an opportunity to perhaps characterize your character in a different way. So let me give you an example. Let's say we have a woman who's on the phone and she's talking to someone. We don't hear the other character. So when you write the dialogue, it's going to be, let's say her name is Beth, and she says something, and then we write beat, because that means she's pausing and listening to the other person. And then she says some more, and then beat, and then beat, and then beat. And that's perfectly all right. But what if you had something like, instead of beat, and we're talking about the parentheticals, strokes her gun, sarcastically, nervously, picks her nose. Any of those is more interesting and characterizes the moment and the character, and all of a sudden it's more entertaining, more original, and even more specific and clear. And so you're okay using beat. I'm not against beat. I'm just communicating that it's an opportunity. Oh, forgot obvious exposition. What is obvious exposition? Let's go back to this scene. This is a good example of obvious exposition. How long have we been married, dear? 15 years, sweet boy. Oh, yes, I can remember our honeymoon in Hawaii. We rented a cottage, didn't we? Where was it? On the North Shore. Remember, we both worked for Homeland Security back then. And what this is characters telling each other things they already know. These speeches are really aimed at the audience, and that is obvious exposition. You're trying to tell us things that we need to know in an obvious way. And this is something that we want to avoid. Okay, let's talk about subtext. And here is the question, another multiple choice question. Is subtext the emotional content of the spoken word, the underlining meaning of words implied by the character's voice tone or implied by the context of the scene, or what the actor acts, the underlying motivation? I'm sure you're all going to get this right. The answer is E. It's all of the above. Let's give you an example, and perhaps my favorite example, from The Princess Bride. Princess Bride is a story of once there was a boy and a girl, and the girl used to ask the boy to do things for her, and every time the girl asked the boy to do something for her, he would say, "As you wish." And the girl thought that every time he said, "As you wish," what he meant was, "I love you." So the writer has cleverly stated the text and the subtext in this case, but "as you wish" is the text, it's the words, but what it really means is "I love you." So it is the emotional content of the spoken words, right? And it is the underlying meaning of the words implied by the character's voice tone. Now, the voice tone, how do you indicate the voice tone? Usually the context tells us that, but sometimes we have to use a parenthetical where we write sarcastically or nervously or lovingly or some other word that helps us understand how the character is speaking, the voice tone of the character. The underlying meaning of the words could be implied by the context of the scene. So if the boy is holding the girl, the context tells us that the meaning is "I love you." Now, same thing's true for "Here's looking at you, kid" from Casablanca. All these same things apply. This number D here about what the actor acts, I've often thought actors understand subtext probably better than anybody. And sometimes taking an acting class can help you with your subtext, maybe, maybe not. Here's another example. Indiana Jones has been beat up. He's sore, he's bruised. And he tells his girlfriend, "It's not the years, honey, it's the mileage." Now, he's not talking about a car, right? He's talking about himself. Okay, we have a situation here where a bad guy is holding a woman hostage. He has a gun on her, and a cop points his gun at the bad guy, and he says, "I'm glad you got your gun pointed at her, because the moment you pull the trigger, why, I'm going to blow your head clean off." Which is better, that or this? See, this is the text. This is what he actually says. This is what it really means. And we can tell by the context and the situation. And of course, the voice tone of Dirty Harry will also tell us. So I'm hoping that helps. Those examples help. But I got another one here for you. This is courtesy of Richard Walter. Hey, Susie. Wow, is that a new dress you have on? Yeah, I just got it. Well, what do you think? How do I look? Holy moly, it gives me goosebumps just looking at you, really. Okay, this is terrible dialogue, right? It doesn't even sound like real dialogue. How would you convert this into movie dialogue? New dress, like it, love it. Or maybe she just kind of does this twirly thing with the dress on. They just communicate non-verbally here. But here's the point. Are they talking about a dress? They're not talking about a dress. They're talking about a relationship. Okay, which is better? Young lady, you're definitely pregnant. Or, no doubt about it, Mama Bear, your ego is prego. And that's from Juno. Now, we're often told that we should not write real life speech, but that we should imitate real life speech. But I think we have to take it one step beyond that to make it fresh. I mean, after all, no one talks like Juno in real life. No one talks like Jules and Vincent in Pulp Fiction, or like Albie Singer in Annie Hall. We try to make the dialogue fresh. It has the style of real life speech, but it goes beyond that. Don't be afraid to go beyond that. Don't go too far, but don't be afraid to go beyond that. Okay, which is better? I've lost patience with your explanations. Your time is up. Or, I've counted to 3. See, whenever Holly Hunter says, I've counted to 3, everyone knows the conversation is over. So see, this is the text, and this is what it actually means right here. So find inventive ways to write your dialogue. Fresh dialogue. We want that so bad. Okay, we have a sword fight scene from The Princess Bride, and normally the characters will shout at each other and call each other names. Here's what we do in The Princess Bride. You're wonderful. Thank you. I've worked hard to become so. I admit it. You are better than I am. Please understand, I hold you in the highest respect. This is just fresh dialogue. It's entertaining, it's original, it's specific, it's clear, and it's just a lot of fun. And it subverts our expectations. We don't expect characters to talk like this. And of course, the writer has a reason, because these characters are going to become allies later on. Okay, action. We have here some overwritten description. I wish I hadn't put this heading up here so that I could make you wonder if this is overwritten or not. In some of my, when I'm in a real classroom, I'll have, or sometimes online, I'll have students say, but Dave, these are specific details, and you're always telling us to write specific details. And my response to this is, yes, but they are incidental details. They're not important details. And maybe we don't need them, or maybe we only need a few of them. So how would you rewrite this? Well, I actually reverse engineered this and pulled it from the Academy Award nominated script Rocky. And this is what was actually written. The gym looks like a garbage can turned inside out. Now I can visualize that. It doesn't use very many words. It's lean, and it's clear. It's entertaining. I mean, this is really great screenwriting here. Okay. John knew what he had to do, but he recalled the words of his aging mother, which made him hesitate. None of that can appear on the movie screen. Therefore, you can't write it. Only describe on the movie screen what we'll actually see and hear on the soundtrack. So, thoughts and feelings and insights, recollections cannot magically appear on the screen. We have to describe what we will actually see. Now, here's one that I just laughed out loud when I read this. Sarah gives him one of her looks. Well, what is one of her looks? What is that? So it needs to be more specific. Does she look daggers at him? Is she forlorn? Is she nervous? We need more. This one, a raging gun battle ensues. There was four pages of dialogue that preceded this. And then we have this. And I told the writer, I says, this is what should be 4 pages, and the dialogue may be a page. We want to know what the details are. Now, you don't have to describe every blow, every shot, every little thing, but we need to be able to visualize it. Our goal as spec screenwriters is to help the reader see, visualize, and help him or her feel emotion. That's what we do. And this doesn't do it right here. Now here is a description. This one's from Shawshank Redemption. Yeah, I've been using Shawshank. I'm using Shawshank throughout this. I'm going to emphasize these specific concrete verbs. His wingtip shoes crunch on gravel. Loose bullets scatter to the ground. The bourbon bottle drops and shatters. So that's just really good writing. I mean, I can see that, right? Okay. Oh, I got to introduce this before I show it to you. I'm going to show you a scene from Misery, and what William Goldman's doing in this scene. Just prior to this, Annie chops off Paul's foot. Now, in the movie, doesn't happen that way, but in the screenplay, she actually chops off his foot, and this is what happens immediately after. Paul shrieks at the terrible thudding sound, and then his body jackknives. He is beyond agony as blood splashes over his neck, his face, and Annie, her face splashed with blood too, and the sheet turning red, and Annie, eyes dull, getting into position again. I mean, it's almost poetic here, what he has done. And is it lean? Yes. Is it properly formatted? Yes. And it's okay to use characters as secondary scene headings in a spec screenplay. Just realize that the characters, that when you have a character's name, the camera is on the character until we have another scene direction, another scene heading. So, I mean, this is perfectly okay. We do this kind of thing sparingly, but William Goldman certainly had a good reason for using this. And it's clear, it's specific, it's original, it's entertaining, it's attractive, it's fresh, it's moving. William Goldman gets an A. Okay, use specific, concrete, active verbs to characterize. So, oh yes, John is walking to the boat. Okay, I like using this example. I apologize to those of you who have seen this example before, but it's a favorite of mine. First, we have the passive verb. And what we commonly do is we call upon adjectives and adverbs to kind of help something it's kind of specific, but it's really vague in terms of spec screenwriting. So how would we fix this using adjectives and adverbs? Well, John is walking slowly to the big yellow boat. It doesn't help that much. Now, if you remember from junior high, we called adverbs and adjectives helping words. They help verbs and nouns. So it makes sense to pay attention to the verbs and nouns first, and then see if we need helping words to help those verbs and nouns. And here you go. John staggers to the yacht. John sachets to the motorboat. John strides to the dinghy. Now you can visualize this, and they characterize. See, we want to characterize in how we describe our character. Mary drinks a beer. How does she drink a beer? She meekly sips a Lowenbrau. And I know what you're thinking. Aha, Dave, there's an adverb there. Hey, I didn't say that you couldn't have adverbs or adjectives, but that we first look to the nouns and verbs, and then if we need a helping word, then we put a helping word in. But this kind of helps characterize her a little bit. How about this one? Mary cocks her head and downs a Bud Light. She crushes the can against her brow. A different kind of Mary. We see the skyline of New York from a train. It's going very fast and has a gray look to it. Okay, we see. It's okay to write we see, but it is a camera direction, and we try to avoid camera directions, and screenplays are written in third person, and this is in first person. But sometimes there's a moment where we need to use it. So I'm not anti we see, but and there are times to use it, but maybe there's a better way to write this. A silver train streaks towards Manhattan, and it's lean, and it's clear, and it's specific, and it's fresh. It's more readable. Okay, I'm calling this a bonus tip. We're kind of already talking about this, but instead of actions, characterize also reactions. Describe a specific facial expression or gesture or action. So for example, here's how a scene might end. Lisa says, "I love you." And then we go to the next scene. I see this a lot, and I sometimes wonder how Joe reacts to "I love you." Maybe we want to see that. You'd have to decide. So I thought of different ways that Joe could react. He blinks twice and freezes. So he's not sure what to do. He goes to one knee and wrestles with his coat pocket for a ring. Okay, he's over anxious in this case. He shrugs in confusion. Joe is confused here. Panic washes over Joe's face. He does not want this. Joe looks at his watch. This is almost a put down. Okay, oh, you love me. Big deal. Kind of reaction to that. But see how that helps characterize. Yeah, why am I emphasizing this? Because one thing I want to communicate is we miss so many opportunities to characterize and color our characters just in the writing without adding very many extra words. And sometimes not adding any at all, but just revising what's already there. Okay, this is from $1 million screenplay. I think he was actually paid $2.5 million. Shane Black, The Last Boy Scout. Cole is our central character, and Cole is on drugs. He is a football player, and he had better score or the drugs go away. So he's motivated. So let's read this. What does $1 million script look like? Here we go. Cole's fingers paw the cold earth, gouging it. That's a close-up. You don't have to write close-up, Cole's fingers. Just direct the camera without using camera directions. He is like a spring, coiled and ready. The ball is snapped. Turf and snow. So he's given us a sense of what we're seeing of the atmosphere. So he doesn't have to add too many incidental details. A firecracker series of pops as linemen collide, legs churning. Can you see that? The ball, whoops. Okay, sorry about that. The ball floats through the snowy air. Pitch out to Cole. He takes it on the run, tucks it under his arm. Behind him, the quarterback bites the dust, leveled. And by the way, are you noticing the short paragraphs? Cole turns the corner, picks up a blocker, feet pounding, arms pumping. Up ahead, this is a POV shot, right? But we don't have to write POV. We're writing a spec screenplay, and it's for the reader. That's not for the director on how to direct this. Although you are directing the camera so that he can visualize it without using camera directions. Okay, Cole does not blink. He reaches beneath his jersey, pulls out a gun, pumps 3 shots into the free safety's head. Cole keeps going, running for the end zone. Around him, sound, impact, confusion. Again, atmosphere. It's all he's trying to do with this. Another defensive back, straight ahead, reacts with comical terror. Man, what a great description. Reacts with comical terror. And there's more, but this is all I could fit on a slide. But as you can see, it's formatted correctly. It's clear. It's specific. It's original. It's entertaining. It's written in an entertaining style. It's not matter of fact or informational. It's attractive. It's fresh. It's really fresh. It's got a twist in it that we didn't expect. And it's moving. So, hey, good job, Shane Black. Now, our last item to talk about is moving. How to make it moving. There's 2 kinds of moving. There's story and character movement. And, you know, that involves structure and other principles that we don't have time for in today's discussion. We're simply going to focus on emotional involvement of the reader. Okay, we have seen this play or movie or both, but before it was a play and before it was a movie, someone read this book and made the following statement. That book would make a great musical. And the person who said that was Alfred Hitchcock. And why did he say that? Because Alfred Hitchcock understands emotions, the emotions of his audiences. And when he read the book, he saw emotional beat after emotional beat. And in a musical, every emotional beat is a song. And so he thought, that's got to be a great musical because you got so many emotional beats. Why am I telling you about this? I'm emphasizing the importance of of understanding the audience and the reader's emotions and trying to reach the reader through his emotions or her emotions. Okay, there's 4 ways to do that. Cinematic moments, emotional involvement of characters and relationships, how the character grows, changes, declines, or learns. Now, you don't necessarily have to have a growth arc to make your story work. If it's a character-driven story, definitely you want it, but not always essential, but worth considering. I mean, it certainly helps to have one. And of course, meaning. We're talking about theme. You know, theme is the subtext of the movie. Okay, let's look at the ending of Juno. This is from the original 94-page spec before it was made into a movie. And the ending was just 1 page. And I had to kind of edit it down a little bit because I could only fit this much on a screen. But let's read this. Vanessa Loring sits in, so the whole scene is in Vanessa Loring's bedroom. She sits in the old rocking chair, feeding and rocking her baby. And then the voiceover, it ended with a chair. So we have the bookends, you know, it began with the chair, it ended with the chair. Vanessa's expression is one of total bliss. The baby grasps her thumb. On the wall Mark thought needed something is a framed note, handwritten on the back of a Jiffy Lube bill, which is totally Juno. It reads, Vanessa, if you're still in, I'm still in, call me Juno. And then we have the voiceover sum up. It really didn't hurt that bad having him. Afterwards, Bleecker came with flowers. He didn't want to see the baby, but neither did I, really. We both knew he wasn't ours. Vanessa lifts the baby up onto her shoulders and pats him. I think he was always hers. And that's cool. I mean, this line here, the speech, sets up this one. So I think that works really well. But here's the question I'm asking, and I had the opportunity to read this before the movie came out. So I read the spec, and I was head over heels on the dialogue because I thought, at last, fresh dialogue. But anyway, aside from that, I wondered, how about Bleecker? Bleeker's the father. Don't we need to see these two together? How about Dad? How about Bran? How about all these people that she has a relationship with? This is an opportunity. This is a cinematic moment. And that's what I meant by that first comment. The way we reach people is with cinematic moments. And it's so, even professionals sometimes don't recognize a good cinematic moment in their screenplay when they have one. And so I don't know if the director talked to Diablo Cody, but anyway, this one page became 6 pages. And I know you want to see those 6 pages. Well, I can't show you the 6 pages, but let's kind of go through the action. First, the water breaks, and then we go to the hospital, and Juno is in pain, and poor Bran, who is a rescuer, right? She's the stepmother who is a rescuer. That's mainly what she does. Honey, doctors are sadists who like to play God and watch lesser people scream. Okay, and then she gets someone to help Juno with her pain. Then we go to Bleecker. He just won the track meet, and he looks around and there's no Juno. And there's no dialogue with this. It's all handled visually. So this is Juno, this is Bleecker here. He's running out of the stadium and he's going to run to the hospital. Then we have a moment with Dad. And Dad says, someday you'll be back here on your own terms, something like that. And so we have a nice little moment with them. See how we're milking the emotion? This is a cinematic moment. Movies are visual. Come on. And then Bleecker comes to the hospital. One of my favorite moments is the dirty track shoes on the hospital sheets. But now we get to see them together. After all, he is the father. And then Vanessa gets the baby. The woman in the hospital hands the baby to her. Vanessa says, I have a son. That's what she's saying here. I mean, it's a very emotional moment. And then we have another moment with Bleecker. And then it ended up with a chair. Now we have our bookends. Now we have our note. But then we go back to Vanessa and just milk this a little bit more with her baby. And so yes, here's the conclusion. Here's what I want you to remember. Right lean, yes, but milk the emotion, dramatize dramatic moments, but don't go overboard in doing that and make it, syrupy and just too much. But we want the reader to see and to feel, right? Okay, science fiction writers. I know there are some out there, and I've read a lot of science fiction scripts, and the characters are often flat in those, and I've wondered why, and I think it's because science fiction writers, it's easy to get caught up in the worlds that you created and the cool spaceship and all the science that you're using and so forth, and even sometimes languages and so on. And we pay a little bit less attention to the characters. So in those situations, I like to ask my client, do you like Star Trek, and what do you like about Star Trek? And they, of course, they always do. And when I ask them the question, what do you like about Star Trek? Guess what the answer is? Oh, it's Kirk, Spock, Bones, Scotty. And my response is, yes, it's the characters. It's the characters that make it work. The science and all that stuff is good, but you've got to pay attention to the characters. Now, I'm going to share a personal story. I hope you won't mind me sharing this. This is not about science or commerciality, but I remember years ago, I saw The Usual Suspects. I thought, this is really a good film. I mean, I would not change anything in the script. The script won an Academy Award. And I also liked King Kong. And then I looked at the box office, and The Usual Suspects made 34 million, and King Kong made $562 million. And I says, what's the difference? Well, yeah, King Kong was a bigger movie and it had special effects and all that. But then it hit me. The Usual Suspects, there is no relationship that we emotionally identify with. It's really an intellectual exercise. We have a cop interrogating verbal. That's basically what it is. And I wouldn't change a thing. But there's nothing emotionally involving, or there's not a lot that's emotionally involving in this. But King Kong, we have the girl and the monkey, that relationship. I thought, well, let's look at other movies, Dave, come on. So I looked at 2 9/11 movies about 9/11. United 93, okay, that's, almost, it's not a documentary, but it doesn't really get too involved with relationships. But World Trade Center is about a relationship. There's not a lot of special effects here. It's mainly two guys under rubble and talking to each other, and flashbacks, and sometimes they see things and so on. So I thought, okay, well, what's the box office there? And United 93 was 76 million, and World Trade Center was 163 million. Now, this is not about commerciality. This is about reaching people, reaching your audience, reaching your reader. I'm not talking about art. I'm not talking about being commercial, writing a blockbuster or anything like that. I'm talking about reaching your reader. And the conclusion I came up with is you got to have heart. And I know that looks hokey. It's the only image I could find. I almost want to start singing, you got to have heart, that from the musical Damn Yankees. But really, it's the relationships. Even if it's an antagonistic relationship, if you can get us emotionally involved in the relationship, then you've got something. Okay, I told you we'd talk about Shawshank Redemption. This is the crisis, one of the best crises I've ever seen in a movie. Here's Andy. He's in solitary confinement. The warden comes to tell him, essentially, that Tommy, the person who can prove that Andy is innocent and get him out of prison, is dead now. He tried to escape. Of course, he was murdered. And so what Andy says is, well, it ends here then. Have H&R Block do your taxes. And the warden comes in, and in the screenplay, the warden rages. That's the word that's used. The warden rages at Andy. And I counted 7 exclamation points. See, even professionals can over-exaggerate emotions. What actually happens in the movie is he almost whispers. He says, no, it goes on. Or you will do the hardest time there is. I'll cast you down to the sodomites. And notice he uses biblical language. That's his speaking style. I'll cast you down to the sodomites and so forth. A great moment, but I want you to notice that we do not want to exaggerate emotions. Now, in terms of getting emotionally involved, we are emotionally involved with poor Andy. It looks like the worst thing that could possibly happen to him. The theme of Shawshank Redemption is hope. It's mentioned 3 times. Here's Red. Hope is a dangerous thing. Hope can drive a man insane. And then later, when Red gets a letter, it's at the end of the movie from Andy. Remember, Red, hope is a good thing, maybe the best of things, and no good thing ever dies. And how does this movie end? The last words of dialogue are, Andy's on, Red is on the bus headed for Mexico. I hope Andy is down there. I hope I can make it across the border. I hope to see my friend and shake his hand. I hope the Pacific is as blue as it has been in my dreams. I hope. And then we see them reunited. And that is meaning. And meaning gets us emotionally involved. Expand your purpose in life. Accept the larger world. Deepen your relationships. That seems to be what Toy Story 4 is all about. And that's what touches us. Now, you don't necessarily have to have a theme to make your story work. I mean, some action movies, there's just no theme. And it's okay. But a theme can certainly help. And meaning, especially meaning in terms of what the characters do. Okay. There are three types of general endings, and you can tell we're at the end of this little class. And so here's my last comments. Which is better, happy ending, bittersweet ending, or a downer ending? Well, a happy ending is good if we're rooting for that happy ending or rooting for those characters. If I don't like the characters, then I could care less what happens to them. A bittersweet ending works if we connect with the meaning and, once again, the characters. As in Casablanca, he gives up love for a higher cause. It's a bittersweet ending, and it works. It affects us emotionally. Okay, a downer ending works if we respond to it and respond to the characters, as in Grapes of Wrath or Planet of the Apes. The secret is not in the ending, but it is getting us emotionally involved with the characters and with the action of the story. So in summary, write an original screenplay that's attractive, fresh, and moving. And thank you for your attention. Keep writing. Is there a particular genre that is harder, easier to write a script for? Well, the easy one is horror. And that's why there's so many horror movies produced by beginning producers. It's kind of easier to handle that particular genre. Otherwise, it depends on the story itself. Okay, I wouldn't want to pick one or the other. That's hard or easy. How do I handle for different protagonists in a 1-hour drama? I'm afraid it's going to be too much happening. And, your fears are, I can understand the fear of having a situation like that. Usually there is one central character and everyone else is a major character. Now, if this is truly an ensemble piece, then the challenge is, yes, you have to get us involved with both of these protagonists. Okay. So each one has to have a strong story. So, in a 1-hour drama, you at least have an A story, a B story, and a C story, maybe a D story as well. But the A and B they have to be equally strong, and they have to be intertwined in a creative, original way. Okay, I hope that helps. Do you have any contradictory opinions on Cole Haig's formatting book? I don't. I like Cole Haig's formatting book, but it was written years ago. And I must say that one of the reasons I became Dr. Format is because I had so many questions from people who read Cole Haig's formatting book asking me, what does he mean by this? What does he mean by that? And so forth. So what he's written, I think, is good for the time that he wrote it. I just think it's a little bit difficult. And I'm just saying that from experience of students I've had that kept asking me questions. I have a 2015 version of the Bible. Should I update it to version 7? Let's see, 2015. So it means you have version 6. And you could probably get by with version 6. I mean, version 7 has, I think 3 or 4 new chapters and everything's updated, but most of it is what you already have in version 6. It's just, do you want this extra information? That's the question to ask. Let's see, although not generally accepted, can pictures be added to a screenplay? Well, the standard answer is no. I mean, what a reader wants to see is a title page and the screenplay, and that is it. And if you did do something like that, you might put it at the end of a screenplay. And, you know, that might help. I worry a little bit if it's a real location, you know, because we don't even know if we're going to have that location in the shoot. But that's probably how the best way to handle that. If you felt like it was really essential that the reader actually see what one of these things looks like, whatever it is, then maybe I would. I remember when I read A Quiet Place was written, the spec screenplay for A Quiet Place. It was written by two guys from Iowa who had a lot of experience on the farm. And they actually explained in the screenplay, there was just a little parenthetical there of how long you would live if you were caught into one of those silos and sucked down into the corn, into the grain. And I thought, well, you probably shouldn't do that. It was interesting. It came later in the screenplay. I don't have a problem with it. I'm okay. So you just want to be careful. What about inventing a new genre and a whole new form of entertainment? Go for it. And when you say new genre, I'm betting you will have more success if it's a new twist on an old genre. But yes, if you can create a new genre, and we've had mixed genres, you know, a horror Western, you know, for example, and, you know, I say go for it. I love what William Goldman once said. You can do anything you want if it works. So if it works, hey, go for it. I am puzzled why an industry which is there for the advancement of literacy and the arts, yet those in charge never want to read anything unless someone has told them to do it. Seems there is no desire to read. Well, yeah, no one wants to read in this town, and the real goal is to make money. Okay. But yeah, it's just the way it is. I mean, people don't want to read. And the other thing is there are so many screenwriters sending screenplays that there just has to be a way to screen these out. And so that's why readers really came into being. We need someone, we need someone to say, here, these are the ones to read. These others are not for you. And it's just what's happened. And here's how I look at things like this. You know, it's never going to be a level playing field. You do the best you can with the situation that you have and with the talents that you have. You know, I've had clients say, but I don't live in LA. And my response is Diablo Cody didn't live in LA, and neither did Michael Arndt when he sold The Little Miss Sunshine. Do the best with what you have, and don't let negative things get in the way of the progress that you want to make. Can there be too much subtext? I think there could be, but I have seldom seen it. And yes, you don't want to be redundant. There's such a thing as repetition that does not work and repetition that does work. I mean, here's looking at you, kid. The repetition works. But usually it doesn't work. So you have the right idea there. You don't want to get too redundant. I've heard I should avoid parentheticals. Okay. Don't avoid them altogether. I'm always leery when I hear things, never use an adverb, never use a parenthetical, never this or never that. And I mean, the only rule in my mind is never show up at a meeting drunk. Everything else is a guideline. And so I would not completely avoid parentheticals, but I would use them sparingly because, yeah, you can use them too much. Now, what you often hear is, well, the actors are not going to pay attention to them anyway. Well, the actors is not who you're writing for. You're writing for the reader. And sometimes the reader needs to know if this line is said sarcastically or if it is not said sarcastically. So there is a place for them, for parentheticals. But when I see like 2 or 3 on a page, man, I'm going, you're just overdoing it. Often the context communicates that this guy is mad. You don't have to write angrily in there if we can already see by the speech. or by the context that he's angry. We are told to never direct in scripts, but you show direction talking about misery. So yeah, there's no direction. There's no direction in that scene. He just used scene headings. Perfectly legit. There's no camera direction. There's no shots or angles or anything like that. And the same is true for The Last Boy Scout. But you can direct the camera without using camera directions. I mean, if you write a tear forms in her eye, that's a close-up. You don't have to write close-up. You're directing the camera. This has to be a close-up. There's a tear in her eye. Now they can decide whether they want to really do a close-up or not. But yeah, you want to direct the eye. You want to be visual. You just don't want to use technical directions that intrude on the read because you're writing for a reader. Okay, so much is said about the first 10 pages or even 5. Yes, because you do have to make a good first impression. We're advised that we need to grab the reader immediately, but what if we are trying to establish a bit of calm or a situation where the protagonist feels safe entering a new world before an inciting incident that changes the tone? That's perfectly legitimate. A hook, a first page hook, is something that makes me interested in reading page 2. It does not have to be bombs. It does not have to be a car chase. It can be a very quiet scene. It just shouldn't be a typical, derivative thing that we've seen before, has no drama in it at all, and so forth. So I think what you want to do is okay. You may want to have something on page 1 that pulls us in a little bit more and then give us a little bit of calm. Usually the inciting incident happens later anyway. It's not going to happen immediately. So Matt, good luck with that. I'm a psychological horror and sci-fi writer that does not like happy endings. That's fine. My topics are usually statements on current events. Okay, I'm already worried. As a producer, I would say, what's the story? Yeah, and let me back up a little bit. I asked a writer once, what's your story about? And she says, oh, it's about saving the wolves. And I said, no, that's the theme. What's the story? The story is about a character who has a problem and his action or her action. Okay, so be careful about making statements. I'm already worried that it's going to be a preachy screenplay. Hopefully it will not be a preachy screenplay, Debbie. I hope it's going to be wonderful. But the main thing you have to do is focus on the story and the characters, and then let the statement come through their actions and their dialogue, and not be overly focused on the statement or the theme that you feel like you have to make. Okay, that's general advice, and of course each situation is differently. I wish you the best with yours. Dave, could you tell us a little bit about villains? When I think of villains, there's a movie screenplay that I absolutely love called Kramer versus Kramer. There's no villains. There's only opposition character. And I like to think in those terms, that there's a central character and there's one or more opposition characters. And these opposition characters might even be good guys, and which is true with Kramer versus Kramer. All of the characters are good people, but they're at cross purposes. And so you don't necessarily need a villain per se, like, Darth Vader, I would say, is a villain. I mean, he's almost totally black. Okay. It's okay to have them, but we will identify more with people, with bad guys who have a little bit of humanity to them. Let me justify that to some extent. Pixar movies, one of their rules is every villain must have a reason, a motivation that we can understand and even identify with. And so you look back at all the Pixar movies, and the villain or the bad guy will always have a motivation. We understand. We just disagree with the villain's methods or what the villain is doing, action and so forth. Okay. So in most cases, regular characters, if it's a comic book on the screen or like a straight action movie or horror, it may be just a villain. It may just be a regular villain. that doesn't have anything. He's just like a monster. Okay, so it really depends on the story and the genre. More to the point, does too much subtext make the reader think, come on, no, because when there is, I like to think of it as room for subtext. Go ahead, make my day. There's room in there for the subtext. And when I hear dialogue that's really interesting, and usually dialogue that contains subtext, that leaves room for subtext, is more interesting than just straight text. So it's hard for me to see that a reader would get antsy. This is really, the reader is going to think, come on, get to the point, if you're just simply overwriting a point. And it has little to do with whether there's subtext or not. Okay, so I hope that helps, Liz. When writing for TV or streaming, do we write a spec or add? Okay, if it's streaming, if it's a feature film for streaming, then it's exactly the same. You don't have to worry about acts or anything like that. If it's a pilot that's feature length, you don't have to worry about acts and so forth. If it is a 1 hour drama, then yes, 1 hour drama or a half hour sitcom, that we need teaser act one, end of, not need end of act one, but you need to delineate the acts if it's a TV show. Okay, so and everything is formatted in standard format except for situation comedies that are multiple camera shoots. Is it true that it's much more difficult to break in with a spec now than it was in Shane Black's day? Yes, it depends on the script. If you're trying to break in with a blockbuster or a high budget movie, absolutely it is more difficult to break in with a spec, which is why I often am telling screenwriters, and please forgive me for saying this, think small. Maybe start off with a low budget script or something for an independent company or a mid-sized story, because it's so much easier to, I should say, much less difficult to break in with a smaller script than with a high budget script, which is what everybody is writing. Everybody's trying to break in with a blockbuster. It's very difficult. Work your way up. The Robert Towne, who wrote Chinatown, he wrote The Last Woman on Earth before he wrote Chinatown. Have you heard of it? No. Okay. Is formatting even a problem anymore with all the available software? Yeah, you've got to understand how to use formatting tools. Why would a montage work really well here? So your software is not going to tell you that. But definitely get the software, because it takes care of the tabs and the continues and all the stuff you don't want to have to worry about. But you do want to understand how to use the variety of formatting tools, and they're not as difficult as it seems at first when you look at them. So great question, Paul. I have to say right now, these are wonderful questions. We got Molly, this is the best group. I mean, this is really a good group, because these questions are fantastic. I hope I'm giving answers that will be helpful. Let's see. I have a script, historical fiction, surrounding JFK's assassination, and have incorporated a character into the history of events portrayed in the script. Think Forrest Gump. Is this frowned upon? No true story is a true story in Hollywood. I mean, it's hard to find a true story that's handled precisely the way it actually happened in real life. And so you could certainly do that. And we know that Forrest Gump is a fictitious character who has been inserted into all these historical things. And it's a ton of fun. It's a great screenplay. It was a difficult one to write. I wouldn't want to take that on. You got to hold our attention with something that's episodic like that. But it's not frowned upon. And it's probably you probably have a good idea there that you'll want to go forward with. Dialogue from lengthy phone calls, two-way radio traffic, etc. How can these be formatted without so many extra parentheticals? Well, use the intercut. And that way you can describe in action what the characters look like, facial, you can even describe facial expressions and things like that. So that's the first thing that pops into mind. You have to use correct format, but that is one way to avoid all the parentheticals, because I mean, you said it's two ways, so we see both people then, or we at least hear both people, and otherwise you just have to use the parentheticals, but that's expected in a phone call situation. Is there a danger of too many character reactions? Yeah, there is a danger of going overboard with that instead of just beat. Leave room for readers, actors to react to the dialogue. Yeah, if that's what, if their reaction is going to be what you want them, how you want them to react. The whole point of the character reaction is to help them feel something more than they would otherwise feel. But it's your decision as to, do we need a character reaction here or not? Nah, I don't need one here. Oh, but I do need one here. I mean, this would really enhance the emotional content of this scene. So that is a question that can only be answered if we look at specific examples. I'm really glad, though, that you mentioned too many, because it's easy to go overboard on almost anything. Does a writer need permission to write a story about a real person who is dead? Probably, because that person has relatives. And unless that person's life is in the public domain, then you might have to get rights. But I am not an attorney, and I'm not qualified to give legal advice. And anything that I say here should not be construed as legal advice. So how's that for a disclaimer? Will you put out a Kindle version of your book anytime soon? Yeah, there should be a Kindle version of the Screenwriter's Bible out there. If there isn't, I need to talk to my publisher, because I know there was one out there. And there is a Kindle version of Dr. Format Tells All and the Creativity book and two screenplays. There's not a Kindle version of that, but one of those screenplays, there's a Kindle version, a window in time. What's a good substitution instead of cut to? You don't need editing directions. Only use them if there's a dramatic purpose. That's for a shooting script, and you can reduce the length of your script by omitting them. But sometimes you need a cut to, like, I wonder what Jim is doing. He's probably has all the girls chasing after him. Cut to. And then we see Jim, that he's in pure misery. That's a dramatic reason to use it. But usually you don't need to use dissolve or any of those in a screenplay. You use those sparingly. Should I describe the character's race? If it's important to the story, yes. You should, that is part of who the character is. Then, but if it doesn't matter, then it doesn't matter. You don't need to. Usually with major characters, you're going to want to indicate that. If you don't indicate it, then we assume white, although, I know Lethal Weapon was written for two white guys, but they put Danny Glover in there. What a great choice. And I mean, talk about, see, here's what I mean. When we were talking about sci-fi movies and flat characters, look at Lethal Weapon, how much the characters make Lethal Weapon work. I mean, Shane Black had the right idea there, and he created opposites. The cop who wants to retire without a bruise, and he's got this guy with a death wish as his new partner. I mean, it's a great setup. But usually, yeah, you want to indicate that. I've read that the inciting incident should not be any later than page 12. Okay, we gotta define terms here. A lot of writing teachers and gurus think of the inciting incident as the event that leads us into the second act. I personally call that the big event, because it's a big event in the character's life that radically changes his life or her life. And so that usually happens around page 25. However, I personally use the term inciting incident to refer to the event that upsets the equilibrium established at the beginning. And that usually happens around page 10. And I call it the catalyst. So you have to look at, when a person starts talking inciting incident, you have to say, okay, what do we mean by that? Are we talking about, you know, the big thing that takes place where the character loses control of her life, and all of a sudden she's moved into this world, into act 2? See, the big event, or what a lot of people like Robert McKee call the inciting incident, is the event that usually moves the character into a new venue, a new arena. And so Dorothy goes to the Munchkin land. And we have Andy going into the prison. That's the big event for Shawshank Redemption. And sometimes it's an emotional, new arena emotionally, you know, like there's been a major breakup. The husband leaves the wife, and now what is she going to do? That's a big event. Puts her in a new emotional arena. So you know what you're talking about, what the person is talking about when he uses those terms. Best way to get into a scene late and exit early. Well, getting into a scene late happens more often. And what you do is you look at your scene and you say, you know, could I start this later? I mean, you look at what you've written and you know, what if I started right here? You just make an arbitrary line. What if it started here? Because it's so much more interesting if we come into something that's happening than setting it up, you know. And now sometimes you have to set it up. Not every scene should be started late or exited early. But when exit early, usually when I'm recommending that is when the writer is belaboring the point, and they say, okay, the movie's already, the scene is already over. Get out, you know, let's go on to the next scene. But you're going on and on with reactions in dialogue, and maybe even reactions in terms of action that are simply not needed. Okay, with flashbacks. See, a flashback can be seen as obvious exposition if it's not used correctly. So a flashback, don't tell us about the past until we care about the present. I need to care about this character, and I need to want to know what happened in the past before you start telling me about the past. So flashbacks in the first 10 pages seldom work, unless they're just like a quick flash. You know, bing, you know, we just see this, then we come back to the scene. You know, sometimes that can work. So, you know, don't stop the movie. That's another problem, to tell us about stuff that we need to know. If the flashback stops the movie, then, you know, the movie is starting to drag now, even though you're presenting exposition. So that's another definition of obvious exposition. So with a flashback, you need to prepare us for a flashback. And, you know, maybe one of the best examples is from Casablanca. And it's a huge risk because it's such a long flashback. But we know that Rick and Ilsa, something happened in Paris, and we are dying to find out what happened in Paris. And so when you finally give us the flashback, it is actually part of the movie. And then when the flashback ends, we wonder, well, why did she leave him? It creates new questions. So the flashback kind of answers a question, and then it creates a new question. So that is the best use of a flashback. So the trouble is when you're using it just to, okay, I got to get this information in. You know, you find yourself thinking like that, you're probably in trouble. Can you have only 3 characters with all 3 of them being villains? Yes, but you got to make sure that we can get involved with these 3 characters. So they need to have, they need to be fully dimensional characters, especially if you only have 3, because I would look for 5 to 7 in a movie. If there's only 3, they have got to be extremely well written and have depth and have positives and negatives, even though they are villains. And then we can get into the story. Now you could try where they truly are villains and all three of them are terrible. Then it's just going to take really great writing to keep us involved with them. What would you advise to a writer with an awarded script in a niche market like a Christian thriller? How do you get it read? Do you need an agent? Or like you said, write a small budget spec maybe for a general audience? Okay, what popped into my head when I read that is you look for producers who you feel from their past work might be open to a Christian thriller. So you look for those kinds of producers who might be interested in producing that kind of material. That's where you start. You need an agent if the script is pretty high budget and you're having to go to large producers, then you will probably need an agent for that. But it is less difficult to get a producer to read your script than an agent to get your script, unless that producer is a major producer. So you need to look at the pecking order in Hollywood. And that's really not the right term, but let me explain. When you see a movie, the beginning of a movie, it will say, a Castle Rock picture of an imagined film in connection with Canal Productions and so forth. These are all production companies that were involved. So they all have deals with each other. So you find, say you want a movie to go to Hallmark, okay? Who produces for Hallmark? You find the smaller producers that produce movies for Hallmark, and then you approach them, and they're more likely to read the script than if you were trying to send it directly to Hallmark. They say, hey, you need an agent, or to do that. So you try to find. You want to know where your movie needs to go, and then you find producers who have deals with where you want your movie to end up. Is the best way to have a screenplay read entering a contest? Okay, here's what a contest does. A contest does not necessarily get you read. I'll tell you what I like about contests. First of all, they're relatively inexpensive. Second, you get a sense of where you are compared to other writers. It's not fully, you can't rely on it completely because judges are reading scripts very quickly. And so it's not totally true, but you get a sense of where you stand. And then sometimes you get notes back, and that can be helpful to you. And sometimes a judge who's read your script is interested in talking to you about your work. And so you can make contacts through a contest. And sometimes you win a contest and that gets you read by someone, or you place highly, and it's something you can put on your query letter, and it just adds a little bit more value to your query letter. So I would say contests don't help you in big ways, but they can help you. And I can't see a reason not to enter maybe 2 or 3 contests. The nickel is the granddaddy of them all, and probably the hardest. And I've had 2 clients who have won the nickel. Both their screenplays were character-driven. I know the nickel prefers character-driven. Something that has a lot of depth to it. I have a list of contests on my website. You click on community, click on screenwriting resources, and you can go down to contests, and there's some information there for you. If you're writing about someone that's dead, but not famous, do you need permission from that person's family? You may, like the girlfriend. See, if you're writing about anybody who is not in the public domain and their family or their neighbor can tell that your screenplay is about them, then that's invasion of privacy. Now, having said that, Recall my previous caveat that I'm not an attorney and I cannot give legal advice. And this is not legal advice, but I would say this is something to avoid. In fact, I'm often saying to writers, look, write an original screenplay and break in with that. And now if you have a great story about someone that's dead, you may have to do something, in terms of rights. You may need to talk to an entertainment attorney. They are not cheap. I have a flashback that I think Intercut would work with as past and present collide. Oh, I see what you're doing. You know what, Jacqueline? I did that in one of my screenplays where I alternated between past and present. It's in a window in time. It's one of those, it's one of the screenplays that's in that book, 2 screenplays. So yeah, you can. Now that I understand your question, I had to read it twice to understand your question. Okay, I'm going to do one last one. Hey, Dave, writing a feature that includes animation but isn't fully animated. Oh, you just write animated or animation as part of the scene heading at the end of the scene heading. Yeah, you got it right now. I add animated scene. You don't need the word scene, just animated, and you've got it. Okay, hey, this has been a pleasure. I think my voice is gone. You guys are great. I wish you the best. Keep writing. Good luck to you in the new year.